Welcome to the Super Pumped Business and Life podcast. I'm your host, Ben Walters, and today's episode is different than our other episodes. Because today it's a eulogy to another life lost too young and a challenge for each of us to actively seek the happiness and well-being of those around us, rather than wishing we had after it's too late. While life itself is uncertain and none of us know exactly how much time we have left here on Earth until our death, which we also don't like to talk about, there are some premature deaths that seem to haunt us. I still lament a ServiceMaster colleague that took his own life just days after we had all met together. And I noticed just briefly he was a little withdrawn, just didn't seem to quite be himself. But like so many of us, I was so fixated on my own path, on my own agenda, on my own life, that I failed to see someone who was hurting right there in the same circle as I was. And if you've felt that same thing, that sense of regret, that sense of lament, this episode is for you. This young man, his name was Mike Paternoster. He left behind a wife and he left behind 2 young children. Recently, in my home community of Cincinnati, we also lost 2 20-somethings, very bright, very incredible, seemingly futures ahead of them in Evan Michaelman and Emmy Morgan. And my thoughts and my prayers go out to their families. But today I don't want to talk about them necessarily. I want to talk about somebody different. Last month, on a routine morning, I chose to hike one trail and not another one. Had I chosen the other trail, perhaps a brilliant young woman, Hannah Rose Moody, would still be shining bright for her friends, for her family, and for her adoring followers. Here's the backstory. I was unexpectedly in Phoenix visiting my dad after he called me and told me he had received a cancer diagnosis. It certainly wasn't a planned trip. He called me with the news, and the next day I was on a plane from Cincinnati to Arizona. On my first full day in Arizona, Dad had some other appointments that were scheduled, so I wasn't going to be able to see him until later in the day. And as you can imagine, when you get the news that your dad has cancer, you have a lot of nervous energy, just a lot of anxiety and angst. And I like to be one who's doing things and kind of active to kind of take my mind off it and to think and to center myself. And so I decided I'm going to go for a long hike in the desert. Now, by that point, it's May, it's triple digits, it's hot, but that's how I like to think. And so that very same day, a woman I had never met, Hannah Rose, also decided to go for a solo hike in the desert. She chose to hike the Gateway Trailhead in Scottsdale, a trail I have hiked dozens and dozens of times, a trail that I love. And that morning, I debated in my head. I was like, do I want to hike South Mountain, which I love, and it's got views of downtown Phoenix, or do I want to hike the Gateway Trailhead that kind of looks out over the Scottsdale airport and just has incredible views of Paradise Valley and some of that northern part of the suburbs? And there was no real reason why I chose South Mountain. My hotel was about equidistant between the 2 trailheads, but for whatever reason, I chose South Mountain and Hannah chose the Gateway Trail. In hindsight, it's haunting how a seemingly insignificant choice at the time can have life-changing ripples on the future. Now, it was a blazing hot May day in the Valley of the Sun. It was living up to its name, with nary a cloud in the sky and temperatures soaring well above 100 degrees. But it was also a glorious day for hiking in the desert because the majestic saguaro cactus were in full bloom on both trails. If you've never had the pleasure of seeing the desert in bloom, it is something to behold. These beautiful old giants held beautiful, gorgeous bouquets of flowers in their arms as the bees just buzzed around them, pollinating and doing their work. Some of the big saguaros, these giants that have been there for hundreds of years, looked as though with one of their big arms they were reaching out to try and hand you a bouquet of flowers. It was mesmerizing to hike among these blooming giants. My hike wasn't a good one that day. I actually ran out of water. I was hot, And I almost, because I was so busy peering at the saguaros and their beautiful birds and bees and flowers and all of that, nearly stepped on a rattlesnake out in a pretty remote area of the hike. But fortunately for me, I made it through my hike. But Hannah, on this particular day, never returned from her hike. A search ensued that evening, but was called off at 11:30 p.m. without finding her. The next day, an aerial search spotted her lifeless body a few hundred yards off the trail. While her official cause of death has not been determined by the coroner, her mother and others believe she died of heat exposure and dehydration in the simmering heat. I still regret that I chose to hike in South Mountain that day instead of hiking the Gateway Trail, because I wish I had crossed paths with Hannah. I wish I could have hiked alongside her and made sure she made it safely through the hike and back to her life as a very popular influencer. I was filled with regrets and kept thinking, if I'd only hiked the Gateway Trail, maybe, just maybe, this never would have happened. The morning after Hannah's body was discovered, her story made its way across the local news as well as social media. I wanted to hike the Gateway Trail where Hannah had died just hours earlier. Now, I usually hike with a 3-liter personal hydration pack. It's called a Camelback. But in light of what happened to Hannah, I decided to switch things up, to do things differently. I went to Bash's, it's a local chain out in Phoenix, and I bought a large case of bottled waters. And I tore it open and threw a dozen bottles into a day pack. And then I headed out on the trailhead. My backpack full of water was heavy and clunky, and those bottles were shifting around. But I wanted to be able to share this life-saving water with others along the trail. Now, a mile into my 5.5-mile one-way, 3,000-foot ascent toward Tom's Thumb, I was regretting this decision to bring so much water, because everyone I had encountered as I was heading up the trail was already heading back for the day. They were smart. They had been out to start their hikes much earlier than I had to avoid that midday hot heat. But then, at 1.5 miles into the trail, I caught up with an older couple from Minnesota, Nick and Patty. They had a very tiny bottle of water to share on a 4.5-mile loop with 650 feet of elevation gain. I looked down and it was 95 degrees at that moment, with direct overhead sun, and the temperature was continuing to rise. I introduced myself as I caught up to them, and I told them about Hannah and her story. And then I gave each of them a bottle of water from the 12 in my day pack. And I even took a picture of them. Patty joked and said, "Are you going to put this up on social media and make fun of us or say how stupid we are because we didn't bring enough water, or the, dumb people from Minnesota?" And I said, "No, that's not my point. I have no interest in any of that. The only thing I want to do is help you. I have no interest in humiliating you or browbeating you. And social media, I just have to say, even in light of Hannah's death, that the haters who do that should be ashamed of themselves. That there's no place for that. There's a time and a place for those kinds of public service address, but this isn't the time." And so anyway, I just gave them the water and I took a picture with them, and I just said, "I want you to be safe. I want you to make it through this beautiful hike, admire the saguaros, and go back to your lives in Minnesota safe and sound." I really believe we are all in this thing called life together. And it's tough enough without the haters. So Nick and Patty and I, we hiked together for a bit. And then their trail turned off to the right because they were going a short little loop. And my trail turned up into the mountains for 4 more miles up to the summit. I only encountered one other person in the remaining 4 hours of my hike, a man in his 40s at the summit. I told him about Hannah's story and tried to give him water. He said he'd already drank 1 bottle of water and had another one full still on him, so he refused my water. Now, I knew in my head he hadn't drank enough water given the heat. You can lose that much water very quickly in a matter of a half an hour. but he seemed insulted by my concern. And so we did this awkward back and forth where I was like, just take the water, man. And he's like, no, I don't need your water, dude. And I'm like, come on, take the water. And he didn't want to take the water. And it was super awkward. And I felt a little goofy about it. I thought, why am I trying to force water upon this guy? But I would rather have tried to do my part to save somebody, even if it creates an awkwardness, than to live with the regret of reading later that night that they were doing a search on the north face of the Tom Thumb ascent for a guy who got disoriented and dehydrated and succumbed to the elements. And so I think that's an important thing as we think about people we meet along life's trails is I would rather be more concerned and more caring and reach out even too much than to care too little, to do too little, to wish, oh, maybe I should have, but I didn't. And so anyway, we wished one another well, and he descended down the north face of the summit while I lingered in the shade at the top, admiring the view of the saguaros and the city of Scottsdale. In that peaceful moment, I kept thinking of Hannah and praying for comfort for her family, for her friends, and for her many followers. Now, at this point, it was brutally hot, and there was nobody else around. And my cell phone was even overheated. I tried to use it, and it didn't work. That's when you know it's hot, when your phone says, "Uncle, too hot for me." Now, at this point, I had already drank 80 ounces of water before the hike and another 100 ounces on the 5.5-mile ascent to the top, but I was still hot. And so I took one of the extra bottles of water in my pack and I poured it slowly down over my head. It cooled me down as it ran off my head and down my body. Now I had no regrets, not one, for having the extra water that I had lugged all the way to the top of the mountain. I sat there for a bit, but it was continuing to get hotter and hotter. The sun was just beating down, and I knew I had to get started down the hill. And as I walked alone down the 5.5 miles from the summit in the blistering triple-digit heat to the trailhead, I didn't see a soul. And I felt small and isolated in the vast resonating heat and the deserted desert. And I thought about how Hannah just walked those last steps, and how if I had only been on that trail like she was, if instead of being two solo hikers on our way, we had come across one another, we would have been able to make sure that each other made it back to safety. I would have been able to share the extra water that I had with her to get her safely to where she needed to go. And she might still be posting her uplifting messages to her followers and making people smile. I ended the hike with 3 full bottles of water to spare, even after I gave Nick and Patty 2 and dumped one on my head. It was plenty of water to keep Hannah alive. As I sat in the shade under the pavilion at the trailhead, not far from where Hannah's body was found, I so wished I had been there 2 days earlier and shared that water with her. But I also had to get real with myself about my own selfishness. It's human nature to focus on our own path, our walk, our hike through life. When I normally would fill a personal 3-liter hydration pack, it's designed to take care of me. It's on your back and it has a straw that comes around to the front and you suck that as you're hiking. But if that was my only water and I encountered Hannah, it would have been a little bit creepy or cringy to be like, here's my straw, I have some of my water. Now, of course, in an emergency situation, you would do that. But what if you just quite weren't sure if Hannah was really dehydrated or not? It's easy to give her a bottle of water. She's going to take that most likely, right? But to share a common straw with a stranger, that's a little bit weird. And so it's unlikely she would have done that. She probably wouldn't have taken me up on that offer. And if I was hiking at a faster pace, perhaps I encountered her, I offered her this hydration thing, she politely refused, then I went on up a little ahead, and something ended up happening to her. And so I began to realize that it's hard to take care of others when we're only and solely focused on taking care of ourselves. You see, to see and serve others requires us to anticipate what they might need. And in this case, it was water, right? I needed to anticipate that Nick and Patty probably needed some water, that the guy at the summit probably needed some water. And in this case, that Hannah probably needed some water. So I needed to anticipate that long before I started the hike. Then I needed to take action to meet that need. What does that mean? It meant going to the grocery store and buying a case of water. And then the third thing I needed to do was I needed to sacrifice just a little bit of my own personal comfort for the sake of others. In this case, it was better to carry a clunky backpack full of extra waters to give to others instead of my really cool, sleek red 3-liter hydration Camelback that really only serves me. So in order to do that, anticipate what the others might need, figure out in advance how to meet that need, and then sacrifice a little bit to meet that need. And then finally, and perhaps the biggest challenge, you have to be bold and reach out to people, offering them a lifeline, even when you're risking them thinking you're a kook, or they might reject you, or think you're a little extra, like the guy at the summit. Now, when I'm hiking in the desert, I remember Hannah every time I prepare for my hike, and I carry lots of extra water to give to others. And do you know what? I don't begrudge it. I don't regret it. It's heavier. It's a little more awkward. But man, is it important to be able to do that. And do you know how much, not only does it help other people, but do you know what else it does? It fills my soul. That goodness that I'm carrying out into the world. Getting up every day and thinking, how can I serve others? How can I help others? How can I make others' lives better? Boy, that starts to give you purpose in your life. So my question to you today is, what are you willing to put in your proverbial backpack or purse or briefcase or merce or whatever you carry through life that might be a lifeline to others who cross paths with you? What is your unique gift that you can share with the world? Is it friendship to the lonely? Is it encouragement to the downtrodden? Or perhaps comfort to the grieving? My wife, she loves art, and she loves to make these handmade cards, which are just exquisite with beautiful drawings. And then she likes to put quotes in them. And then she handwrites addresses, and she just writes these notes that are beautiful that says, I'm thinking of you. And it's her way of reaching out with that cup of cold water to people to say, I see you, I care about you, and I'm here for you. So how do you do that in life? Is it your smile? Are you someone who just is an amazing listener, who can give an empathetic ear? Are you a great hugger? Somebody who just gives those big enveloping bear hugs that just makes people feel warm and loved and happy all over? Perhaps you're wealthy and you have the ability to share your wealth with others. Maybe someone who just quite can't make the rent or is struggling in tough choices between winter heat and maybe feeding their family. And you're able to just offer a little bit of extra support to help them get through a financial rough patch. Whatever your special gift that you have to offer to give life to others, give it boldly and give it bountifully. In a recent post, Hannah wrote, who should I reach out to today? That knowing in your spirit, that feeling that won't go away, where you just know you have to do that thing or it'll keep being on your mind. That's him guiding you. Trust that feeling. Listen to it. You never know where that one small, seemingly insignificant decision will end up leading you. End quote from Hannah. At a time when we are more digitally connected than ever before, too many of us are walking through life alone. Despite our filtered, curated digital personas, we are dehydrated, we are isolated, and we are exposed. We desperately need the life-giving water of one another. In another IG post, Hannah says, your story matters. Your story is powerful and purposeful. It's the bridge that allows you to connect with others, to create intimacy, to let others know they are not alone. Nothing is wasted. You are who you are because of your story. Own it. End quote. There's something prophetic in Hannah's words. It's why so many people followed her, why so many people wanted to hear her latest words of encouragement. In fact, she had almost 50,000 Instagram followers. She was a beloved influencer because of her positivity and because of her light. Yet Hannah has passed away. Hannah has passed the torch of positivity, faith, and light to each of us. So keep her memory alive by seeing others. Give them a hug, hear them out, toss them a bottle of cold water. Muster the courage to share your story to inspire them in their walk. And for those of you that spend a disproportionate amount of your time in the digital world, look for the breadcrumbs where people in your network are crying out for help. My daughters were recently talking about some bizarre social media post from an acquaintance of theirs, and he didn't seem himself. It was somewhat comical and somewhat disturbing. And you know people like that, but when you see those posts or you see those things, don't make fun of him or screenshot it and laugh about it. Think of it as his or her cry for help. DM him. Make a plan to get coffee. Break the isolation. Encourage others to do the same. Perhaps that little tug to do something, if you act upon it, will be the difference between life and death. We are all guilty of walking our own path, almost myopically with blinders on. So much so that we fail to look up from our phones and to see one another, to really see one another. And I'm not talking about people's curated social media version of themselves where they took 25 pictures in just the right light with just the right smile to get it all right and perhaps a filter to blast out some imperfections. I'm talking about the real person behind that. Don't be fooled by what you see in the camera, on the phone, in the posts, because a lot of that is illusion. A lot of that is curated. Don't assume that because somebody looks fantastic in the digital world that their life is actually good. It might not be. Look beyond the smiles and the lip-syncing reels and get real. And not just a like or a heart, but DM somebody or text or even, God forbid, call somebody. Meet for coffee. Say, hey, I'd love to go to Dutch Bros with you, or let's go grab a sandwich, or hey, could you get together after work and let's do karaoke together? Think about the power in that human connection. Think about whose life you might reach at just the right moment. Better now to reach out with the cup of cold water that gives life to the thirsty than to live with guilt and regret after it's too late. As I close today, I leave you with the words on the very top of Hannah's current Instagram. It says, just a girl sharing some life things. Matthew 5:13-16. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your God who is in heaven. Be salt and light. Rest in peace, Hannah Rose.